The sky over Willow Creek hung heavy with storm clouds, rain tapping against the tin roof of a roadside diner. Inside, the warm aroma of coffee lingered as a man walked in with his German Shepherd Titan, amber eyes glowing with a quiet strength that carried both loyalty and resolve. But everything shifted when a trembling little girl stepped forward and whispered beside Titan, "Please arrest my father." In that instant, the diner fell silent, and a journey into shadows and hope began. What would unfold after those fragile words were spoken? The sky hung heavy with storm clouds, pressing down over Willow Creek. The little town lay veiled in mist, its wooden houses tucked beneath the arms of maple trees whose wet leaves shimmered as though wrapped in glass. Along the pitted main road, puddles mirrored the faint glow of yellow street lamps, and an old pickup truck rolled to a stop outside a roadside diner. Rain drummed against the tin roof, mixing with the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee drifting into the air. Daniel Ward stepped out of the truck, the edges of his dark leather jacket worn and frayed, his shoulders slightly bent under the weight of memories he had never quite set down. His hand brushed the leash, signaling Titan, the broad-shouldered German shepherd whose amber coat gleamed under the drizzle. Titan climbed down with quiet grace, ears raised, each breath spilling into the cold air like pale smoke. A single nod from Daniel was enough. Titan moved into step beside him, proud yet calm, the kind of presence that carried both storms and silence without wavering. They pushed open the diner door. Inside was warmth where soft neon light spilled over old wooden tables. The scent of baked pastries mingled with coffee, wrapping the morning in an unexpected peace. A few locals sat scattered about, starting their day. When Titan entered, curious eyes turned but softened quickly, for his strength carried no menace, only trust. Daniel chose a seat near the window. He set his cap on the table, staring quietly at the curtain of rain outside. Titan lay at his feet, resting his head against Daniel's boot, amber eyes reflecting the same quiet shadows that lingered in the man's mind. For one who had once worn the badge of a police officer but walked away, Titan was more than a companion. He was the tether pulling him back from sleepless nights and echoes of regret. The waitress placed a cup of coffee before him. Daniel gave a small nod of thanks. He took a sip, the heat searing down his throat, waking him, yet leaving him uneasy. His gaze was still lost in the rain when a small figure approached. It was a girl of about 6. Her dark brown hair clung in tangled strands, her thin raincoat soaked through wide black eyes edged with hesitation. She didn't greet him, nor shy away from Titan as most children would. Instead, she crouched, trembling hand reaching toward the dog's head. Titan froze for a moment, then inched closer, allowing her touch to sink into his warm fur. Daniel frowned slightly, setting down his cup. He was about to ask if she was lost when her lips parted and a whisper as fragile as breath slipped out. "Please arrest my father." The words were soft enough to vanish into the sound of rain, yet they struck Daniel's chest with the force of a hammer. In that instant, the chatter of the diner fell away. Only the ticking of the clock and the steady rain on the roof remained. Patrons turned to look, curiosity and confusion crossing their faces. Daniel straightened fingers, tightening unconsciously around the mug. Fractures of his past, moments when he had failed to act, cut across his mind like sharp blades. But this time Titan was looking up at him, amber eyes ablaze as if to remind him, do not turn away. He lowered his gaze to the girl. Though her voice quivered, her eyes carried desperate pleading. Titan shifted, rising to sit upright, ears pricked, body taut, as though he could sense danger hidden behind her words. The room seemed to thicken with silence, everyone waiting for what Daniel would do. He leaned forward, his voice gentle. "What's your name?" The girl answered almost in a breath. "Tiara." Her name landed on him like a thread tied tight around his heart. Titan tilted his head, brushing his nose against Kiara's hand, an unspoken comfort. For an instant, a fragile smile flickered on her lips, only to fade quickly, replaced by wary fear, as if she had just spoken a forbidden truth. Daniel sat unmoving, eyes fixed on the rain-smeared glass. Inside his head, another whisper rose. The voice of his past, when he had once chosen to keep walking instead of stopping for a man who needed saving. The wound split open again. Yet beside him, Titan stood strong and still, a silent reminder that perhaps this time was a chance to do it differently. The diner's air grew strangely still. Strangers exchanged glances, then turned back toward the table where a fallen officer, a mysterious child, and a German shepherd shared a moment that seemed to hold its breath. Beyond the windows, the storm poured down, erasing the border between present and ghosts of the past. Daniel knew the words, "Please arrest my father," were no child's game. Buried inside them was a secret, a cry muffled too long. His grip on Titan's leash tightened, his eyes firming with resolve. This time he would not let the moment slip away. What he did not yet realize was that Kiara's whispered plea would mark the beginning of a journey that would change everything. For him, for Titan, and for the child who had dared to speak. A journey that would drag them through shadows in search of light. In the warmth of the Willow Creek diner, steam curled from coffee cups, yet Sierra's words spread a tension that seeped into the very walls. Every eye turned toward the table where Daniel and Titan sat. Titan lifted his head, amber eyes, blazing ears rigid, the ridge of his fur standing sharp with instinct. His whole body spoke a single truth. This child needed protection. Daniel felt it too. The leash trembling faintly in his grip, carrying not fear, but certainty. Titan's stance was a message clearer than words. She belongs with us now. Daniel looked again at Sierra. Her eyes trembled, but within them flickered a thin flame of courage, as though she had gathered every scrap of strength just to say what she had said. And with that look, Daniel was pulled backward into memory. Years ago, wearing the badge he had once watched an accident unfold at a lonely crossroads. A motorcycle thrown aside, a man lying still on the pavement. Cars passed by, none slowing down. Tired and worn from his shift, Daniel had kept driving. Only the next morning, seeing the headline that the man had died alone, did he understand what he had abandoned? A chance to save a life. That haunting memory clung to Daniel for years. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw again the desperate gaze of the man lying helpless on the cold, wet pavement. Afterwards, even when he passed an animal caught on the roadside, he kept walking, for the courage within him had already been stained by fear. Eventually, he left the force and withdrew into silence, living with Titan in a small wooden cabin at the edge of town. And now, right before him, a child had whispered a plea for help. This time Daniel knew Titan would not allow him to turn away. Sierra's tiny hand tightened into a fist, her gaze drawn more to Titan than to Daniel. The dog sat steady, his breath slow and even, his amber eyes carrying a promise, "I am here. You are not alone." That presence made the little girl shiver, as if some of her fear had already dissolved. A waitress, uneasy, stepped closer and asked in a cautious voice, "Sweetheart, where is your father?" Sierra didn't answer. She simply pressed her face into the thick, warm fur of Titan's chest. Daniel laid a hand on the waitress's shoulder and shook his head gently, signaling her not to push. He knew the words would come only when the child felt completely safe. In the hush that followed, Daniel watched Titan. Never had those amber eyes seemed so clear, carrying both courage and peace. The dog had no need of words. His presence had become its own language, one that even a frightened child could trust. A sudden gust slipped through the doorframe, snapping the curtains and carrying the sound of rain like a memory from the past. The accident, the abandoned creatures on the roadside, they all came rushing back. Daniel drew in a long breath, his palm resting on Titan's head, the warmth seeping into his skin. This time would be different. He leaned closer, his voice low but steady. Ciara, can you tell me what happened? The girl lifted her head, eyes swollen with tears. She hesitated, then buried her face in Titan's fur once more, her voice trembling. He's the only one I can talk to. Daniel said nothing. He looked at Titan and gave a small nod. In the soft golden light of the diner, the image of a child clinging to a German shepherd stood like a portrait both tender and aching. And Daniel understood. If he wanted to reach the truth, he would have to walk through the world in Titan's language. The wind chime above the door tinkled as though announcing a new passage had opened. Daniel inhaled deeply, a resolve rising within him, unlike any he had felt since the day he left the badge behind. Titan raised his head, amber eyes gleaming like fire in the rain, reflecting the fragile figure of Ciara seeking shelter. In that instant, Daniel felt Titan was more than a dog. He was a guiding soul offering him a chance to make right all the moments he had once ignored cries for help. And as the rain continued to lash against the streets outside, Daniel knew the journey was only beginning. The wooden diner door swung open with a chime, the sound ringing above the storm outside. Raindrops clung to the shoulders of the man who stepped in. He was tall hair neatly combed, polished shoes gleaming despite the wet weather. A faint, practiced smile rested on his lips, carrying a calm assurance. "Sorry I'm late," he said softly, his warm tone spreading easily through the diner. A few patrons nodded in greeting. Others whispered about his usual courtesy. This was Jonas Hale, Ciara's father. For a moment, the room seemed to ease under his presence. His composed appearance always made him seem dependable, a respectable citizen of this small town. But Titan felt otherwise. The instant Jonas entered, Titan rose, his body leaning forward. His amber eyes locked onto the man burning. Ears, sharp breath, heavy muscles taut beneath his coat. Every instinct screamed vigilance. To Titan, the man's scent, his stride, even the way his eyes moved, were signals of danger. Ciara flinched, clutching Titan's neck. She whispered, voice nearly breaking, "Daddy's here." Daniel looked up, watching Jonas approach, his smile widening as he neared. Jonas stopped by their table, bowing his head politely. "Hello, Ward. It's been a while. Small town like Willow Creek." "We all cross paths eventually," Jonas said in a friendly tone. Daniel gave a small nod. His face calm, though suspicion stirred within. Ciara's words rang sharp in his mind. "Please arrest my father." And now the man stood before him, cloaked in serenity, unreadable. "Come here, sweetheart." Jonas beckoned, stretching his hand toward Ciara. The girl pressed closer against Titan, fear burning in her eyes. Titan instantly shifted, placing half his body in front of Daniel and Ciara, amber eyes fixed on Jonas as though reading what lay behind the polished mask. The diner fell into silence. A few customers averted their eyes, but the tension hung thick, binding the three humans and the watchful German shepherd in a still frame near the window. Jonas lowered his hand, the smile still on his lips, though in his eyes a fleeting shard of coldness sparked. Daniel caught it. Years of experience told him eyes betrayed more than any smile ever could. "I apologize if she's troubling you." Jonas continued, resting a hand lightly on a chair. "She sometimes imagines things. Children, do you know?" Daniel stayed quiet. He glanced at Ciara, then at Titan. The dog's body was still tight as a drawn bow, yet his breathing had steadied as if awaiting command. Daniel rested his calloused hand on Titan's head, feeling the thick fur beneath his palm. A simple gesture, but one that anchored his calm. "She's no trouble," Daniel said, at last, his voice deep. "What she needs is to be heard." Jonas tilted his head, eyes flashing with something harder to read. He smiled again, but to Daniel the curve of his lips no longer carried comfort. Ciara clung to Titan's lips, moving soundlessly. Only Titan spoke for her in his own way. amber eyes never leaving Jonah's body, a solid barrier declaring, "She is safe here as long as I stand guard." And in that moment, Daniel realized the road ahead would be far from simple. On the surface, Jonas was a model father, but beneath the veneer lay something that terrified his own child into whispers of rescue. Titan had sensed it from the first second. Outside, the rain battered the streets, blurring the lines between appearance and truth, between the civility of a smile and what lay beneath it. Daniel drew in a breath, knowing the real storm had only just begun. The air inside the diner stretched taut like the string of a violin ready to snap. After that brief encounter with Jonas, Daniel understood. He would need help. He could not face the weight of law and the depth of a child's wounds alone. That afternoon, as the rain eased into a thin drizzle, Daniel held his phone for a long moment before pressing a number. His voice, hoarse and uncertain, broke the silence. "Charlie, it's me, Daniel. I need to see you." On the other end, Charlie, the social worker Daniel had once partnered with back in his days on the force, paused in surprise, then let out a soft laugh. "It's been years since you called. I'm guessing this isn't about grabbing a beer. Tell me what's going on." Daniel's eyes drifted to the window. Outside, Sierra sat on the wooden steps of the porch, both arms wrapped tightly around Titan. She whispered something into the dog's ear lips, moving non-stop as though unraveling a story too long held in. Titan lay still, amber eyes glowing with quiet tenderness, his steady breath rising and falling as if answering her in his own rhythm. Lowering his voice, Daniel said, "There's a child, and her father. I think I need you here." By the next afternoon, Charlie had arrived in Willow Creek. In his early 30s, lean and quick-footed, he carried the energy of a man who had devoted his life to children. Unlike Daniel's withdrawn, weathered presence, Charlie radiated warmth and vigor. "Mr. Ward," he greeted, offering his hand with a kind smile. "I heard. Where's the girl?" Daniel tilted his head toward the porch. Sierra was still there, clutching Titan's leash as if it were her lifeline. The moment she noticed the stranger, she shrank back, clutching the dog tighter. Titan rose, body angled forward like a shield, yet his posture wasn't aggressive. His amber gaze stayed locked on Charlie, weighing every movement. Charlie lowered himself slightly, keeping his distance. His voice was soft as falling rain. "Hello, Sierra. My name is Charlie. I work with children like you, to listen to whatever you'd like to share." Sierra didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on Titan, her small hand brushing through his thick fur, again and again seeking comfort. Titan looked at her, then back at Charlie. His ears pricked, then slowly lowered as if signaling, "This one is safe." Watching Daniel felt an unexpected warmth in his chest. Titan once more was speaking in a language only he could carry. From that day on, Sierra grew inseparable from Titan. Each morning, while sunlight was still as thin as gauze, she sat on the porch steps whispering to the dog. Her words were too soft for grown ears, but Titan caught them all, his amber eyes reflecting her hidden burdens. "You know Titan, in that room." It was so cold, she murmured, fingers tracing the leash. I wanted to scream, but no one ever answered. Only the ticking clock. Titan pressed his nose gently into her palm, his warm breath washing over her skin like reassurance. Once Daniel happened to pass by and saw Sierra leaning against Titan, her small shoulders trembling, but her face calmer than ever before. The sight left his throat tight. He remembered every time he had once turned away from cries for help, and realized that now it was Titan holding a fragile soul steady against silence. Charlie recorded everything in his notebook. After several days, he turned to Daniel. "She's chosen Titan as her bridge. That's a gift. If we want to reach the truth, we must walk the path she's chosen, the language of silence and the presence of that dog. Daniel nodded, his gaze falling to Titan sprawled on the rug, Ciara's legs tucked beneath his head. In that moment, Titan wasn't merely a dog. He was a piece of destiny placed at the right time, a healer for both the child and the man who had lost his way. One evening, as the wind rattled the windows, Ciara whispered again to Titan. Daniel sat at a distance, letting the space belong to them. Faint fragments reached him. I don't want to stay silent anymore. I'm afraid of that room, but I'm even more afraid of my father. Daniel's fist tightened, his chest aching. Charlie's hand landed gently on his shoulder, stopping him. Let Titan do his work, Charlie murmured. The dog nudged Ciara's cheek, amber eyes soft as lanterns in the rain. Tears streaked her face. But a smile, fragile yet real, broke through as she released the first shard of memory she had buried. Daniel knew then. The door had opened. In the days that followed, Ciara clung to Titan everywhere, on the porch, along the trail, into the woods, even to the diner at the end of the street. To outsiders, it looked like simple attachment. To those close, it was clear Titan wasn't just protection. He had become her refuge, her silent companion through wounds too deep to name. On the final night of that week, Daniel sat on the porch, watching Ciara rest her head against Titan, fingers gripping the leash as if afraid to let go. Beside him, Charlie scribbled a note, then spoke softly. You see, Daniel, this isn't just friendship. It's rebirth. Daniel said nothing. He knew he'd been given a chance. To repair the past, to stand steady, to open a door alongside Titan for Ciara's childhood. Outside, misty rain fell again, catching the glow of street lamps. Ciara's whispers merged with Titan's warm breath, like a fragile yet unyielding song, promising they would face what came as long as they walked together. The air in Daniel's small wooden house grew heavier each day. Not from rain or cold, but from the fragments of memory flickering in Ciara's eyes. The girl still clung to Titan, as if he were part of her own body, gripping the leash, as though it alone kept her upright in the storm. Charlie sat across the table, his thick notebook filled with hurried script. After days of observation, he looked up as Daniel returned to the living room, coffee steaming in his hand. Do you see it? Charlie began, voice low. There are no bruises, no marks of violence on her body. Daniel set down the cup, a fleeting relief in his eyes before tension returned. But her behavior... Charlie nodded firmly. Exactly. She's withdrawn, skittish, terrified of darkness. Each time someone mentions room or silence, she clings to Titan like her life depends on it. That's the trace of another kind of captivity. An invisible wound. Daniel said nothing, only the whistle of wind through the cracks in the door filling the room. A familiar ache burned inside him. The same ache from every moment he had once ignored a cry, because it left no mark on the skin. His hand clenched, reminding himself that this time he would not turn away. In the corner, Ciara curled into Titan's fur, her hand trembling against the leash. Titan lay, unmoving, amber eyes open wide like a sentinel in the dark. His ears twitched at her faint whisper, room. Charlie noted it carefully, then closed his book. His brows furrowed as he looked at Daniel. Jonas, her father, may have used a room as punishment. No blows, no scars, but a prison of silence, a confinement that breaks the mind. Children can survive discipline. It's silence and isolation that forge the heaviest chains. Daniel shuddered. The image of Jonas rose in his mind, a polished man, warm voice, a smile that made everyone in the diner believe in him. But Titan never had. From the very first moment, those amber eyes had seen through him. And now the pieces were falling into place. He remembered Ciara whispering to Titan, her voice trembling, I don't want to be silent anymore. That single sentence haunted Daniel, slicing into old memories. Memories of all the times he had let cries for help vanish into the void. That evening, Daniel stepped onto the porch. Mist hung low over Willow Creek, the street lamps casting long shadows across the wooden planks. Titan sat beside him, ears erect, gaze fixed into the darkness ahead. Daniel bent down, his hand resting on the dog's head. "You see it too, don't you?" he whispered. "That man. Something is wrong." Titan couldn't speak, but under the light, his amber eyes shone like confirmation. The next day, Charlie tried a different approach. He sat on the floor, keeping space, waiting for Sierra to lead. Titan pressed close, silent interpreter at her side. "Sierra," Charlie said gently, "if you'd like, you can draw that room for me." At first, she shook her head. Then Titan shifted, nudging her arm with his nose. After a pause, her small hand lifted a pencil, trembling across the page. Slowly, she sketched a small rectangle. No windows, only thick blackness. Daniel's chest tightened as he stared at it. "That's what haunts her," he murmured. Charlie nodded. "The wounds aren't on her skin. They're carved into memory." Days passed and Kiara clung to Titan even more. One night, the power snapped out and the house plunged into darkness. In that instant, Sierra screamed, clinging to Titan so tightly the dog struggled to breathe. Daniel rushed with a flashlight, finding her eyes brimming with terror. Titan pressed his body against her, building a wall of warmth for her to hold on to. In that moment, Daniel had no doubt Jonas was the shadow behind her fear. A model father in public, but in private, he had left scars no one could see. The following evening, Daniel sat on the porch with Charlie. The lantern above flickered gold insects, humming in the quiet. Daniel sipped long from a cup of cold coffee. "Do you think we can ever prove it, or is this just whispers and invisible fear?" Charlie met his eyes. "Ward, sometimes proof isn't just on paper. When a child trembles at a word, when a shadow makes her suffocate, that's truth too. Titan helped her bring it out. Now it's our duty to protect her." Daniel said nothing. He glanced toward Titan, lying with his head on Sierra's legs. The child had fallen asleep, lips still moving as if speaking in dreams. Titan's breath was steady, but his amber eyes glowed outward into the night, a flame on guard. Daniel's heart tightened. He knew. This time there could be no retreat. Outside, Willow Creek sank into heavy fog. But inside that small house, an unspoken vow had been forged. Titan would guard Sierra and Daniel, with Charlie would uncover the truth behind that polished mask. The air grew weighty, heavier than the rainy days before. The wind hissed through the roof tiles like voices from the past. Inside, Daniel sat still at the table, his gaze drifting to the porch, where Titan and Sierra sat entwined. She clutched the leash pressed close, as though letting go would cost her everything. Charlie waited nearby, notebook open, pen poised. At first, nothing seemed different. Sierra murmured scattered words, lips moving for Titan's ears only. But then her voice deepened, shaking. "I hate that room." Charlie's eyes flickered. Daniel froze. Sierra clutched the leash tighter, burying herself against Titan. Her voice cracked. "In there, you have to be so silent. You can't even hear yourself anymore." I was scared. I thought I was gone. Titan shifted, pressing his head against her shoulder, his warm breath weaving into her hair, pulling her back from the edge of memory. Daniel covered his face, her words cutting into him. They weren't childhood fantasies. They were wounds. Real, unseen wounds. Charlie scribbled, then closed the notebook, unwilling to turn the moment into cold record. He whispered to Daniel, "You heard it? This is the missing piece. The secret room. A place where silence was forced. No blows, no bruises, but a prison of the mind." Daniel's reply came rough, broken. "That room. That's the truth Jonas hides behind his polished face. And now Titan has helped her let it out." That night they sat by the fire, Flames painted the wooden walls in amber glow, but the weight of Ciara's words hung heavy. She slept on the rug head against Titan. His eyes, reflecting firelight, stayed sharp, guarding against the dark. Charlie kept his voice low. "Ward, in my experience, children only share truth when they feel completely safe. For Ciara, Titan is that place. If she keeps returning to the room, it means it's real." Daniel turned the teacup in his hands, eyes distant. "Years ago, I saw cases of abuse where no proof could be found. I walked away then. But this time," he gripped the cup tight, "this time I'll see it through." The next morning brought rare, clear skies over Willow Creek. Ciara led Titan through the yard, whispering to him. Each time she spoke of the room, Titan pressed closer, shielding her. Daniel watched, heart-twisting. He remembered Jonas's polished shoes, his charming smile, his firm handshake. Everyone believed he was the perfect father, but Titan had known otherwise from the very first glance. And now Daniel understood why. By late afternoon, Ciara was drawing again. With unsteady hands, she sketched a square room with no windows, a single hanging bulb. Blackness filled the page, broken only by that cold, lonely circle of light. Daniel's throat closed. Charlie set his hand gently on the paper, murmuring, "This is powerful evidence." The room left no scar on her skin, but the memory cut deep. She lived through silence imposed on her. "Ward, do you see Titan here?" Daniel looked closer. In the corner, Ciara had drawn a faint patch of amber fur. Not clear, just a shadow, but enough to recognize Titan. In that darkness, Charlie continued. She imagined Titan as the light. Daniel bowed his head, eyes burning. His hand pressed firmly on Titan's back, voice trembling like a vow. "She'll never go back there. Not while you're here. Not while I'm here." Titan lifted his head, amber eyes blazing with a fierce, steady light. That night, while Ciara slept, Daniel and Charlie sat together on the porch. A crescent moon hung above its silver light, spilling across the roof. Charlie flipped back through his notebook, the pages crowded with ink. "Ward," he said quietly, "what we have now are still just words and drawings. If we want to protect Ciara from Jonas, we need to find that room. We need something real." Daniel nodded, his eyes set with resolve. "We'll find it. Willow Creek isn't large. That room must exist somewhere inside the Hale house." Outside, Titan lifted his head, ears sharp, as if he too had heard the vow. The night wind pushed through the trees, and Daniel's chest swelled with the weight of it. He knew he was stepping into a path with no retreat, a path not only to save a child, but to atone for the mistakes he once ran from. In the dark, Ciara dreamed of the room again. Silence pressed against her ears until she could hear only her own frantic heartbeat. But this time Titan was there. His amber eyes glowed, pushing light into the blackness. And in that dream, she whispered, "I don't want to be silent anymore." The night in Willow Creek was unnervingly still. The sky hung low and starless, only a few pale points glittering through drifting clouds. Daniel sat alone on the wooden porch, a cold cup of coffee at his side, staring into the void. Titan rested by his feet, his slow breathing like the steady drum that kept Daniel anchored to the present. But silence always opened the door to memory. Scenes unspooled like old film reels, sharp, merciless. Years ago, he had driven along the outskirts as dusk fell. Rain had come suddenly, slicking the road. A car spun out, crashed into the ditch, and rolled onto its side. Daniel had stopped. He still saw the woman's terrified eyes, still heard her cries through the rain. But instead of running to her, he had turned away. He told himself others would come, that he had no duty. He stayed in his car, heart pounding, then started the engine and left. The next morning, the headline had broken him. The woman had died trapped inside because no one reached her in time. Daniel read those words again and again, searching for a loophole, but found only weight. That night he drowned himself in drink, and from then on, the memory trailed him relentless. He once believed time would dull it, that work or distraction might smother the guilt, but it never did. Each ambulance siren, each flash of red and white lights tore it open again. Now with Ciara asleep in his home, clinging to Titan as if clinging to life itself, the past returned sharper than ever. The chill of the night wind was nothing compared to the cold truth he had nearly let history repeat. Titan stirred, nudging his head against Daniel's hand. That small warmth made Daniel tremble. He looked down into those amber eyes glowing beneath the porch lamp, soft yet unwavering. "You're telling me I can still change," he whispered, voice raw. Titan offered no words, but that touch said enough. The past was not a life sentence. Daniel drew in a long breath. In his mind, the face of that woman blurred, giving way to Ciara. The child's terrified eyes when she spoke of the secret room, the way her hands shook when shadows fell. If he turned away now, he might as well be repeating the same sin. The next morning, golden light poured across Willow Creek's rooftops. Daniel rose early, staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. His face bore the marks of time, his eyes still heavy with shadow. But there was something new, too. A faint, steady flame. When he stepped onto the porch, Titan was already waiting upright and alert. Ciara still slept inside her breath, even hair fallen across her cheek. Daniel watched them both, the fragile child and the loyal dog, and new life had given him a second chance. Charlie arrived at noon carrying a stack of files and a small recorder. He set them on the table. I reviewed everything he said. What Ciara has described matches the signs of psychological confinement. But to protect her, we need the next step. Daniel's reply came firm, unwavering. "We'll find that room. And this time I won't turn away." By late afternoon, Daniel walked Titan along the dirt road skirting the town. The air smelled of dry grass and wood smoke from distant chimneys. Children's laughter drifted from the playground, and Daniel glanced down at Titan. "Back then," he said slowly, "I let a life slip away right in front of me. I thought I'd lost the right to be called a protector. But you've reminded me, Titan, that who we are is decided in the present." Titan trotted at his side, noble and steady, amber eyes catching the glow of dusk. In that moment, Daniel felt a chain in his chest loosen. He wasn't free yet, but he had begun to move forward. Each step now belonged to Ciara, to protecting the fragile spark she carried. That night, Ciara sat at a small table clinging to Titan. She whispered, "I dreamed. In that room, if I screamed, no one heard. But Titan did. Titan always hears me." Daniel stood in the doorway, struck silent. Tears rose not from pain, but from the realization that he wasn't walking this path alone. Titan was leading him out of shadow, and Ciara was the reason he had found courage again. He stepped forward, sitting across from her, speaking softly. "From now on, you won't be alone anymore, Ciara. We'll search for the light together." She blinked, then clutched Titan tighter. For the first time, hope glimmered faintly in her young eyes. That night, Willow Creek sank into dense fog. Yet Daniel did not drink himself into oblivion as he once had. He lay down with a single thought: protecting Ciara was the only way to reclaim what the past had taken. Outside, Titan kept his watch. His amber eyes burned against the dark, a reminder that the road ahead would be hard, but it was no dead end. The night stretched long, wrapping the town in its hush. The rain had stopped, but the scent of wet earth lingered in the air. In the small wooden house, a thin lamp cast fractured light across the floor. Daniel sat at the porch door left ajar, listening to the mingled breaths of Ciara and Titan inside. The girl hadn't yet surrendered to sleep. She clung to Titan's neck, afraid to let go. Daniel started to rise and urge her to rest, but froze when he heard her whisper through the stillness, "Titan," in that room. The darkness was so thick. It made me feel like I didn't exist at all. Every word from Ciara had pierced Daniel's chest like needles. He pressed a trembling hand against the doorframe, heart twisting painfully. In her fragile whispers, he heard more than fear. He heard the despair of a child pushed to the edge of existence. Titan shifted closer, pressing his head firmly against her shoulder. His amber eyes glowed gently beneath the dim light, steady as if saying, "I'm here. I won't let you disappear." Ciara buried her face in his thick fur and continued, her voice breaking. "In that room I screamed, but no one heard. I was afraid I'd turn into dust in the darkness, afraid no one would remember I had ever lived." Daniel staggered back half a step, fingers clawing into the wood. Her words ripped through the silence of his mind, hammering home a truth he could no longer ignore. Blows may leave bruises, but darkness in the soul was what truly broke a person. The next morning, Ciara sat at the wooden table, nibbling slowly at the toast Charlie had left. Her eyes still bore dark circles. Daniel sat across from her, hesitant to speak for fear she might shrink away. Under the table, Titan lay close occasionally, lifting his head to lick her wrist, urging her to keep going. After breakfast, Daniel guided Ciara out onto the porch. The sky was clearer, clouds drifting lazily, sunlight breaking through the leaves. He sat beside her, inhaling deeply. "Ciara," he said gently, "last night I heard you tell Titan that you were afraid the darkness in that room would make you disappear." She froze, clutching Titan's leash, eyes widening. Daniel lifted a calming hand. "You don't have to be afraid to say it. I just want you to know. Titan and I are here. We'll do everything to make sure no room ever swallows you again." Her lips moved, but words lodged in her throat. She turned instead to Titan, pressing her forehead against his. Titan let out a low sound, not of warning, but of understanding. Watching Daniel's chest grew heavy. This child didn't just need shelter. She needed someone willing to stand between her and the dark. Later that afternoon, Charlie arrived. He listened carefully as Daniel recounted the night. When the story was done, Charlie's expression tightened. The darkness in that room isn't just the absence of light. It's psychological captivity, forcing a child into silence until they feel themselves fading. That's spiritual destruction. And Ciara is reliving it every day. Daniel's voice rasped. When I heard her say she feared she'd disappear, my heart nearly broke. Death of the body is cruel enough, but death of the spirit. Charlie set a steady hand on his shoulder. Ward that empathy. That's your strength. You can't rewrite the past, but now you can stand and protect her. Daniel looked at Titan. The dog's amber eyes still shone like a lantern in the night. He knew Titan was the bridge pulling Ciara back from darkness, and also the fire urging him forward. That night, Ciara curled against Titan once more. This time, Daniel didn't leave the doorway. He sat listening to every whisper. "Titan, if I disappear, will anyone remember I was ever here?" Daniel bent down, his voice breaking through the dark. "Yes, Ciara, you are here inside my heart and Titan's, and I will never let you disappear." She lifted her tearful eyes, and for the first time a flicker of light shone there. Titan pressed his nose into Daniel's palm, sealing the promise. In that simple moment, Daniel felt his old regrets soften. He could never bring back the woman from the accident years ago, but he could stop the darkness from stealing a child now. Outside, the moon was fuller, brighter than the nights before. Daniel closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "This is the first time I've chosen to stay, instead of walking away." Jonas Hale's house stood at the end of a stone path, branches of old trees stretching to cover the red-tiled roof. The Willow Creek afternoon was painted gold, yet around that house the air seemed dense, as if the light had been swallowed before reaching the door. Daniel halted, his eyes narrowing. Titan walked at his side, proud and taut, the fur along his back bristling. Charlie drew a breath, adjusting the file in his hands. His voice was low, heavy. "You're sure about this, Daniel?" Daniel nodded firmly. "It's time to face him." The door opened as they stepped onto the porch. Jonas appeared as polished as ever, crisp white shirt, dark tie that practiced gentle smile. But his eyes were cold, untouched by warmth. "Daniel Charlie," he greeted smoothly. "What a surprise to see you here. Please come in." Inside, the living room gleamed with framed art shelves, neatly ordered, everything arranged to portray the perfect home. But to Daniel, the cleaner the surface, the darker the shadow beneath. Jonas poured tea, setting the tray on the table. "I assume this is about Sierra?" Daniel leaned back, gaze locked on him. "We want to talk about the room she mentioned. The silent room." Jonas's smile faltered for the briefest moment before he shrugged. "Ah, that. I only wanted her to learn discipline. Children need to learn self-control to grow stronger." Charlie leaned forward, voice firm. "Jonas forcing a child to sit alone in darkness, in silence, until she panics. That isn't discipline. That's destruction." Jonas remained calm, sipping his tea. "You can call it whatever you like. I'm her father. I know what's best for my daughter." In that instant, Titan sprang to his feet. His body stiffened, amber eyes locking on Jonas. A low growl rumbled from his chest, deep and thunderous, like a storm waiting to break. Sierra, sitting near Daniel, clutched the leash tight, her face drained of color. Jonas arched a brow, glancing at the dog with a faint smirk. "Seems he doesn't like me." Daniel placed a firm hand on Titan's back, feeling the muscles coiled like steel. He leaned in, his voice deliberate, heavy with truth. "Titan doesn't hate, but he recognizes fear, and that fear comes from you." The air thickened, pulled taut like a violin string on the verge of snapping. Charlie opened his file and laid the papers across the table. Notes, behavioral reports, fragments of evidence that together painted the truth. Jonas shook his head, sighing. "You're twisting everything. Kiara is weak. I'm only teaching her to be strong. If she's afraid, it's because she isn't strong enough yet." Daniel leaned forward, his eyes burning with a long-suppressed fury. "You call making a child wish she could disappear into darkness teaching? Have you ever heard her whisper in the night, Jonas? I have. She says she doesn't want silence anymore. She wants to live, to breathe, to laugh." For the first time, Jonas's expression flickered. But just as quickly, he masked it with calm. "You're only listening to her inventions. Children have vivid imaginations." Titan stepped forward, blocking Jonas from Kiara's view. His coat shimmered under the sunlight, spilling through the window. Amber eyes blazing like twin lanterns. Kiara clung to his neck, burying her face in his thick fur, seeking refuge. Charlie rose to his feet, his voice sharp and unwavering. "Jonas, I'll be reporting this to social services. You'd better be ready. We will not let Sierra return to that room." A heavy silence fell, broken only by Titan's low growl, rumbling through the room like a live current. Jonas tightened his grip on the teacup, fingers trembling, though he still forced a thin smile. "Do whatever you want. Sierra is still my daughter." Daniel stood, drawing Sierra closer to Titan. His voice was cold steel. "From this moment on, she'll never be alone again. You can hide behind excuses, but the truth is clear. And Titan will always stand between you and her, just as he does now." They left the house wrapped in a suffocating tension. Behind them, Sierra still trembled. Yet this time she clutched Titan's leash tighter, as if she had found a thread tying her to the light. Daniel glanced down at the dog and gave a subtle nod. Titan stood tall, ears raised, a vow etched into every line of his frame. No one would ever break through. Outside, autumn wind howled, spinning dry leaves into spirals. Charlie walked beside him, voice low but firm. "We've begun, Daniel. Jonas can deny it, but the truth will speak for itself." Daniel said nothing, eyes fixed ahead. Inside him, a new resolve surged. This time, he would see it through. Willow Creek lay under a warm evening glow. Sunlight slipped through rows of trees, painting long shadows across worn porches. In Daniel's small house, silence pressed down heavier each day, as though the air itself carried an invisible weight. Sierra sat by the window, hands gripping a notebook still empty of words. Children her age played outside, their laughter carried by the wind. But in her brown eyes lingered only stillness. Since the confrontation with Jonas, she spoke less, each question from adults met with the averted gaze of a door bolted shut. Daniel sat at the wooden table pretending to write notes, though his eyes stayed on her. He recognized the signs, the same ones he'd seen in broken children and scarred adults during his years as a cop. Sierra now stood at the same wall of silence. Only Titan could reach her. The German shepherd lay quietly at her feet, his steady breath a rhythm in the hush. Each time she shifted, he lifted his head, shadowing her like a guardian spirit. Sometimes she reached down, her trembling fingers resting on his back, finding a lifeline in his warmth. That afternoon, as the last light withdrew from the window, Sierra's pencil slipped from her hand. The soft sound cracked the silence like thunder. Her small shoulders began to shake. Daniel looked up, but he didn't rush over. Some tears needed space to find their own escape. Titan moved instead. He rose, nudging his head against her hand. His fur brushed her skin, carrying warmth that told her she was not abandoned. Sierra broke into sobs, throwing her arms around his neck, tears soaking into his coat. Between gasps, she blurted out, voice trembling like a door finally breaking open. "I just want to speak, but I'm always forced to stay silent." The words hung in the air, stabbing Daniel's chest. His heart clenched as memory crashed back. The accident, the silence of his own inaction. Silence had been his sin then, and now he saw it devouring this child's childhood. Sierra pressed her face deeper into Titan's fur. "In that room, I heard my heartbeat, and then it faded until I couldn't hear it anymore. I was so scared. I thought I had disappeared." Titan whimpered softly, amber eyes glowing in the dusk, speaking in a language only she could hear. Daniel walked over, knelt before her, and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Her trembling flowed into his palm. After a long pause, she lifted her tear-reddened eyes. "Uncle Daniel, I'm tired of holding everything inside. With my father, it feels like I'm locked away." Her confession sliced his conscience open, but also lit a path. He knew he had to act, not just for her, but for his own redemption. That evening, Charlie came by. Daniel relayed every word, his voice cracked with emotion. Charlie listened, worry etched across his face, yet a glimmer of hope sparked in his eyes. "This is the first step, Daniel. She's spoken. Titan has opened the door." Daniel nodded, his gaze turning to Kiara, now resting her head against Titan. Her eyes were weary, but lighter. In that fragile image, he saw both brokenness and renewal. The night closed with the wind whispering outside. But inside the house, silence had shifted. With Titan, silence became a bridge, from pain to hope, from shadow to light. Daniel stood at the window, watching the yellow glow fall across the wet street. In his heart, he promised he would never let silence bury her voice again. The next morning came gray, a thin veil of fog wrapping Willow Creek, dimming every roof and cobblestone street. Charlie walked along the wooden fence of Jonas's house, his shoes crunching over dry leaves. In his hand was a small flashlight, its beam sweeping across cracks and windows. He was used to observing, but today his heart beat faster, carrying an anxious weight. The house was too quiet, too clean, too perfect. He circled around back to the door leading into the old cellar. The padlock gleamed unnervingly new. He crouched low, fingers brushing scratches around the metal. The paint chipped tiny marks etched into the wood, all of them facing outward. Charlie's stomach tightened. That door had once been locked. From the outside, he pulled hard on the handle. The door didn't move. The thick wood trembled, but the lock was buried deep in the frame. The truth stood cold and undeniable. There was a room in this house that had once imprisoned a child. Charlie froze the flashlight, shaking in his hand. In his mind, he heard Sierra's whispered words to Titan. I hated that room. Inside, I had to be so silent it felt like I disappeared. And now, the pieces fit. He went straight to Daniel. In the small kitchen, the smell of coffee lingered in the air. Daniel leaned against the wall, listening as Charlie spoke. Each detail landed like a hammer against his mind. The lock, the scratches, the unshakable truth. Jonas had locked his own daughter away in darkness. Punishment so cruel, it defied belief. Titan lay on the floor, head raised, amber eyes fixed on the two men, as though he too understood. Daniel closed his eyes. The weight inside him felt like the old guilt from years ago, the night he had walked away from an accident instead of helping. But this time he knew. If he hesitated, Sierra would pay the price. This still isn't enough, Charlie said quietly, setting the photos of the lock on the table. We need more, something direct. Otherwise, it's just suspicion. Daniel tapped the wooden table, his gaze heavy. And while we look, what might Jonas do next? If he feels cornered, he could lock her away again. Or worse. He stopped the thought, too dark to voice. Charlie's eyes drifted toward Sierra. She sat in a chair, brushing Titan's thick fur, golden strands falling in the lamplight. She looked calm, but that calm was fragile like glass that could shatter with the slightest touch. Daniel swallowed hard. I won't stand by again, Charlie. Whatever it takes, I will protect her. That afternoon, Daniel took Sierra and Titan to the small town park. The swings creaked in the wind. Children kicked balls across the grass, but Sierra sat close to Titan, her eyes flicking nervously around as if someone might appear at any moment. Daniel knelt beside her, softening his voice. Here you're safe. You have Titan. You have me. You have Charlie. No one will ever force you into silence again. Sierra looked at him, lips pressed tight, then bent her head and whispered into Titan's ear. Only when Titan let out a low hum did her eyes ease. Daniel watched, realizing that sometimes a dog could break through walls that grown men could not. And that thought scared him, because Jonas could strike again at any time. Night fell. Daniel sat alone on the porch, crickets singing from the fields. Titan rested at his feet, his body like a shield. Inside, Sierra was asleep, her breathing steady. Daniel raised his eyes to the black sky. Ahead lay a battle he was not sure he could win. Charlie had a lead, but a lead was only a spark. They needed a torch to burn away the darkness. Titan, he whispered, resting his hand on the dog's back. This time, I won't let the past repeat. She will have a voice. And I will have my chance to make it right. Titan lifted his head, amber eyes glowing under the moonlight. In them, Daniel saw a silent strength that human beings rarely carried. Willow Creek lay buried in autumn night. The wind tore through the trees, rain poured down as though to wash the town clean. Inside the house, Daniel sat at his desk, papers scattered, his mind restless. Every clue Charlie uncovered only deepened his dread. Titan curled near the door, ears erect, eyes fixed on the storm-streaked window. Suddenly, he leapt up, barking loud enough to rattle the silence. Daniel jolted his pen, falling from his hand. Titan rushed over, tugging at his sleeve, pulling toward the door. "What is it?" Titan, Daniel asked, but the dog only pulled harder. He opened the door. Rain lashed against him, cold wind flooding the porch. Titan bolted into the storm, barking, then turned back, eyes blazing. Daniel followed, heart pounding. In the corner of the porch, under a broken section of roof, Sierra sat curled tight. Her hair clung wet to her cheeks, her thin dress plastered to her shivering frame. Her lips were pale, her wide eyes filled with terror. Sierra, Daniel rushed forward, dropping to his knees. Titan pressed against her side, body warm against her trembling shoulders. She looked up, voice shaking. "I'm scared of that room." The word stabbed through Daniel's chest. He pulled her into his arms, rain drenching them both. Her fragile breaths hitched against his heartbeat. He couldn't tell what was rain and what were her tears. He only felt the shaking of a child who had lived too long in fear. "It's over, Sierra," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You're here with me and Titan. No one will lock you away again. No darkness can hold you anymore." Titan pressed his head against her leg, humming softly. Sierra sobbed, burying her face into Daniel's shoulder, her whole body trembling. Yet beneath the sobs, Daniel felt it. The first fragile spark of safety. Charlie ran in breathless from the rain. She froze at the sight, Daniel clutching Sierra, Titan surrounding them like a cloak. Tears filled her eyes. "Daniel," she said, voice trembling, "this is the clearest proof we'll ever have. Not papers, not locks, but the scars carved into this child's heart. We must act before it's too late." Daniel nodded, his gaze still locked on Sierra's tear-streaked face. The girl whispered, her voice cracked but firm, "I don't want to be silent anymore." The words rose above the storm, louder than any accusation, piercing the night with truth. That night, Daniel laid Sierra to rest in a warm-lit room, Titan guarding the doorway like a sentinel. She clung to a tuft of his fur even as she drifted into restless sleep. Daniel sat beside her bed, his heart heavy yet burning bright. Outside, the rain kept falling, but inside, warmth had begun to take root. One embrace in the storm had drawn the line between despair and hope. The morning in Willow Creek was painted with the pale gold of new sunlight, rain from the night before still clinging to the leaves. Daniel stood on the porch, steam curling from the coffee in his hand. Inside, Sierra was still asleep, and Titan lay at the threshold, amber eyes wide open, alert like a faithful sentinel. When the sound of a car engine broke the quiet at the end of the road, Titan sprang up with a low growl. Daniel frowned, setting his cup down. A sleek, polished car rolled to a stop in front of the gate, and out stepped Jonas Hale. As always, he was immaculately dressed, shirt crisp, tie perfectly knotted. His thin smile looked rehearsed, his calm eyes masking something deeper, but Daniel saw it immediately, the shadow flickering behind those pupils. "Good morning, Daniel," Jonas said softly. "I came to take my daughter home. That's where she belongs." Daniel's fists tightened, but before he could speak, Titan surged forward, planting himself firmly at the steps. His fur bristled, his solid frame radiating power. Those amber eyes locked onto Jonas, moving with the steady precision of a guardian. Jonas faltered for the briefest moment before forcing a smirk. "A dog. Keeping me from my own daughter." The door behind creaked open. Sierra peeked out, her face, pale, still haunted by last night's dreams. The instant her eyes met Jonas, her body stiffened, her hand clutching the doorframe. "Father," she whispered, barely more than a breath. Jonas turned, his face a mask of gentleness. Kiara, come home. That's where you belong. Titan growled low, stepping forward, blocking the sightline. His body tensed, ready to spring. And in that instant, something inside Jonas cracked. His eyes flared with a sharp, venomous anger. The polished smile vanished, replaced by raw fury. His calm voice broke into a shout. "Stand aside. Do not come between me and my daughter." The roar shook Sierra, her lips trembling, but no sound came out. Daniel stepped beside Titan, his gaze steady on Jonas. He could see it clearly now. The mask of the perfect father had shattered. What stood before them was not patience, but unrestrained rage. "Jonas," Daniel said, voice firm, unyielding enough. "She needs safety, not a locked house." Jonas's fists clenched, veins bulging along his temple. He inhaled sharply, struggling for composure, but his words still quivered with anger. "I only taught her to grow strong. What would an outsider like you know?" Titan's growl deepened, his muscles taut as wire. He pressed close to Sierra, eyes fixed on Jonas, every fiber ready to act. Charlie stepped out of the house, her voice cold. "Jonas, what you called teaching, turned her into a prisoner of her own childhood. And today, you've shown it to all of us." Sierra trembled, eyes brimming with tears, glancing from Daniel to Titan. Her voice broke in fragments. "I fear his eyes." Daniel bent down, resting a hand on her shoulder, nodding gently. "You don't face him alone anymore. Titan and I are here." Jonas stamped his foot, his rage flushing his face scarlet. His gaze swept from Titan to Daniel, sharp, furious, and helpless. "You'll regret this," he spat before spinning on his heel. The car door slammed and the vehicle roared away, spraying water across the road. Silence fell. Only Sierra's ragged breaths and the whisper of wind through the trees lingered. Daniel wrapped an arm around her, Titan still standing guard, amber eyes glowing with lingering tension. Yet in that glow, there was also light. The light of truth breaking through. Daniel knew Jonas's mask had been torn, but the man would not let go easily. That evening, Willow Creek sank under heavy skies. Dark clouds smothered what little sun remained, covering the town in a muted gloom. Along the road to Jonas Hale's home, Daniel walked slowly, each step heavy with the weight of memories he had long avoided. Charlie walked beside him, clutching the official papers authorizing their search. Titan moved at Daniel's side, body rigid, ears high, his nails scraping the stone path like drumbeats foretelling something inevitable. They stopped before the weathered wooden door. Daniel drew a deep breath, hand tightening on the cold handle. The old instincts of a policeman returned, the tension before confronting a hidden truth. Charlie nodded silently, signaling readiness. The door creaked open, releasing a stale, damp air, like a breath from a place long forgotten. Flashlights swept across walls stained with gray and mold, barren and harsh. No decorations, no signs of a child's room. Only 4 stark walls pressing down in suffocating silence. Daniel stepped in first. A chill seeped instantly into his skin. "Like a prison," he murmured. Windows had been boarded, sealing out all light. The room was drowned in gray, swallowing breath itself. Charlie's voice cracked as she scanned the emptiness. How long did a child sit here, between nothing but walls? Her hand tightened around the files, knuckles pale. Titan crept forward, body taut, a growl rumbling in his throat. His amber eyes fixed on a dark corner where the beam of light revealed nothing but peeling paint. He growled again, steps heavy as though sensing shadows still lingering. Daniel crouched, tracing the scratches etched into the floor. Small arcs, faint the desperate markings of tiny hands clawing for escape. His chest tightened, memory stabbing him, the night long ago when he drove past an accident and didn't stop. One moment of turning away had haunted him for years, And now, standing in this room, he knew this was his chance at redemption. "Charlie," he rasped, voice raw. "This isn't discipline. This is imprisonment." Charlie nodded fiercely, eyes blazing with fury. "This evidence, it changes everything." Titan suddenly barked, the sound booming against the walls. He lunged toward the far side nose, pressed to a hidden seam. His fur bristled, his growl thundered. Daniel shone his light, revealing a small, concealed door disguised like a vent, but sealed shut from outside. A shiver ran through Daniel's spine. "Even the escape was sealed," he whispered. Charlie turned away, tears welling. The image of Sierra alone in this suffocating dark, unable to call out, unable to cry, left only the sound of her own breath fading. It tore through her heart. Daniel rested his hand on Titan's back. The dog lifted his head, eyes blazing, ears sharp, as if declaring what humans could not. This place devoured a childhood, and now it stood as proof of who Jonas Hale truly was. The air grew heavier, pressing down like the weight of gray stone walls about to collapse. Yet within that suffocating silence, Daniel felt something ignite, an ember of resolve flaring into fire. He turned toward Charlie, his voice sharp and unwavering. "We're going to bring Sierra out of this darkness, and no door will ever hold her again." Charlie nodded, tears streaking her cheeks, but her eyes alive with faith. Titan lifted his head, amber gaze fixed on the looming wall, not with fear, but with a silent vow. That same evening, Jonas Hale's house sank into the pale gold of a dying sun. The wooden walls stood still, the porch scattered with brittle leaves. Yet the atmosphere felt so thick it seemed it might shatter at a touch. Jonas sat at the table, his hand gripping a coffee cup long gone cold. A letter announcing an impending inspection from the local authorities lay unfinished before him, every word carving into his pride like a blade. His face remained calm, lips curved in the familiar courteous smile, but his eyes burned with a storm. Once admired in Willow Creek for their composure, those eyes now glowed with a dark fire, the simmering heat of a man cornered for too long. To Jonas, the world was betraying him piece by piece. Daniel Ward, the fallen ex-cop, dared to step into his family. Charlie, the young social worker, questioned his authority. And Titan, the dog, stood between him and his child, stripping away fragments of the power he had always believed was his by right. Small footsteps echoed down the hall. Sierra appeared, her damp brown hair clinging to her temples after school, clutching Titan's leash tightly. The German shepherd pressed close beside her ears, pricked amber eyes locked on Jonas. "Come here," Jonas said, his voice low, calm on the surface, but thrumming with menace. Sierra hesitated. Titan shifted forward, his body a living wall. The girl's feet faltered back, her eyes trembling with fear. Jonas slammed his cup onto the table, porcelain shattering with a sharp crack. He rose, the mask of civility warping into rage. "What did you tell them? Who told you to speak? Answer me, Sierra." She flinched, clutching the leash. Titan growled low, stepping closer, his gaze never leaving the man's advancing figure. Jonas drew a deep breath, veins taut along his neck. "You think outsiders understand us? They want to tear this family apart. I'll teach you the meaning of silence." He lunged, seizing her frail arm. Sierra gasped, her notebook slipping from her hands. In that instant, Titan leapt, teeth sinking into Jonas's sleeve, jerking him back. Fabric ripped in a violent tear that split the heavy silence. "Get off me, beast!" Jonas roared, his eyes bloodshot as he thrashed. But Titan held firm, every muscle straining like iron cables. Then from deep within the chaos, Sierra screamed, a voice trembling, yet fierce with desperation. "I don't want to be silent anymore." The cry tore through the house, reverberating like a bell of defiance. It was not a plea, but a declaration, the shattering of chains long tightened around her heart. Jonas froze, stunned for a heartbeat, then fury overtook him. He dragged Sierra toward the hallway, toward the heavy door at its end. the door to the silent room. Titan's growls rumbled like thunder as he resisted, teeth locked on the man's arm. "I'll show you who decides here," Jonas bellowed, his voice cracking with rage. Sierra thrashed, eyes brimming with tears, her gaze clinging to Titan's. Daniel had once told her Titan understood every whispered word, and now in those burning amber eyes she found her last thread of hope. The house became a battlefield. On one side, a father wielding cruelty as power. On the other, a dog, straining with every fiber to protect a child. Between them stood Sierra, small and fragile, her heart pounding for freedom. The silent room's door loomed at the hallway's end, swallowing the light like a maw. Jonas dragged his daughter closer, the floorboards trembling under the struggle. At that very moment, an engine roared outside. The front door burst open. Daniel and Charlie rushed in, faces stark with alarm. Daniel's shout cracked the air. "Stop this now!" Jonas spun, eyes wild and gleaming with madness. "Get out of my house. She's my daughter. I'll teach her silence." Charlie darted forward, planting herself in the path. Titan seized the moment, yanking with all his strength. Jonas staggered. Sierra slipped from his grip and fell into Daniel's arms. Daniel held her tight, his heartbeat pounding as though holding redemption itself. Titan stood firm between them, and Jonas' fur-bristling amber eyes blazing with defiance. Jonas faced him, breath-ragged rage and fear twisting his pale features. And in the crimson light of dusk, the scene crystallized, a battle of shadows and light, of power and protection, playing out within the walls of a single home. The old house on Willow Creek seemed to hold its breath. Darkness pressed against shuttered windows, the narrow hallway stretching toward the door of silence like a passage into despair. Jonas dragged his daughter onward, Titan straining against him, growls reverberating like a storm. And then it came again. The cry that split the night, raw and unrestrained. "I don't want to be silent anymore." The words tore through the wooden walls, cutting the suffocating dark like a blade. Daniel, racing from the porch, felt the sound pierce his very chest. It wasn't just a child's scream. It was the eruption of years of pain. And for Daniel, it was a moment that ripped open his own past, the eyes of a woman he once left behind in a moment of weakness. But tonight, hearing Sierra's voice, something surged inside him like fire, the vow that he would never let history repeat itself. Charlie was right behind him. They reached the heavy wooden door, but it was locked tight. Inside, Jonas had slammed the bolt across in a frenzy. Daniel pounded his fist against the panels, the sound echoing through the walls. Jonas opened the door. "Don't do something you'll regret." Inside, Sierra struggled, her small hands clawing through the dark, while Titan pressed against her side, teeth bared. Jonas's voice erupted, hoarse and wild. "Get out. This is my child. She has to learn silence." The words "has to learn silence" cut through Daniel like a whip. He rammed his shoulder against the door, each blow sinking with the frantic thud of his heart. The wood shuddered, but held firm. Charlie darted around, desperate for something to break the barrier. "We have to get in now, Daniel. If he locks her away." Inside, Titan lunged again and again at Jonas, forcing the man back with every strike. Each impact carried a message his power meant nothing anymore. Kiara sobbed, her voice breaking through the storm. "Don't lock me away. I want to hear my voice. I want to speak." That cry pierced the darkness like a fragile beam of light. Daniel grit his teeth and crashed into the door again. Dust rained down from the frame. Charlie shoved a metal bar into his hands. "Use this." They took turns slamming against it, every strike like a drumbeat of desperation. Sweat ran into Daniel's eyes, mixing with the rain clinging to his skin. He roared, not just at the door, but at the ghosts of his own past. Jonas's shouts inside faltered, cracking under fear. Titan drove him further back, unrelenting, a wall of fur and fire. Sierra clung to the shepherd's thick coat, her tearful eyes shining with something new. hope. For the first time, she heard people outside fighting to reach her, refusing to abandon her. "Daniel, it's giving way," Charlie shouted. Daniel hurled himself forward once more. The hinges screamed, the frame split, and a narrow sliver of light carved into the gloom. From within, Titan growled, urging him on. "Come on, Titan," Daniel roared and struck again. The door finally burst open, cold air rushing out with the stench of damp and despair. What they saw froze them in place. Sierra trembling in the corner, Titan standing tall before her, his fur bristling, amber eyes blazing at Jonas. The man's chest heaved, his face twisted in rage and desperation. For a long second, silence reigned, broken only by ragged breaths and pounding hearts. Then Sierra's voice rose, trembling but sharp. "Don't want to be silent anymore." The words landed like arrows, piercing the false walls Jonas had built for years. Daniel stepped forward, pulling Sierra into his arms. Charlie stood guard, his eyes locked on Jonas. Titan did not move, his body taut, the sentinel between child and captor. In the darkness of that room, a prison once meant for control, rose the raw cry of a child and the defiance of a dog. And in that moment, Daniel knew he had crossed the line between haunted regret and the chance for redemption. The wind howled through the trees outside, but inside every heart, something irreversible had shifted. Jonas's house sagged beneath a heavy silence, broken only by the creak of wood and the hiss of air through the rafters. The smell of mold clung to every corner, as though the walls themselves had long borne witness to a secret too long kept. Daniel's shoulder bled from his battering. Charlie still clutched the iron bar, panting. Just as their strength faltered, a shadow surged forward, amber eyes blazing in the half-light. Titan. The shepherd coiled, his muscles stance rooted, a growl rumbling deep in his chest. Then he hurled himself against the door. Dust exploded in a cloud. The hinges rattled violently. He didn't stop. Titan clamped his jaws around the iron-locked teeth, grinding with a shriek of metal. He wrenched and tore every movement, straining to its limit. The door groaned, splinters raining as though it were crying out under the assault. Inside, Sierra pressed into the corner, eyes shining with tears and hope. "Titan, please take me out of here," she whispered. Jonas lunged to stop him, but the shepherd spun, unleashing a growl that split the room like thunder. Jonas froze, shoved backward by the sheer force in those burning eyes. Eyes that carried not just fury, but devotion. "Come on, Titan, you can do it," Daniel roared. Charlie jammed the bar into the fractured wood, straining with all his strength. Titan pulled and twisted, jaws trembling with effort. The sound of metal grinding filled the house like a scream. One beat, two, and then, crack! The lock snapped. The frame split wide, fissures racing through the timber like veins of light. Titan hurled himself once more, splintering the wood. A beam of daylight pierced the gloom. Sierra's eyes widened. For the first time, she saw the prison around her break. Her voice rose, faint but steady. "Titan." Her call gave him strength. With one final surge, Titan smashed the door open. Wood exploded onto the floor as light flooded the room. Daniel and Charlie rushed in. The sight seared itself into their minds. Sierra huddled Titan, towering before her. Fur bristled fire in his gaze. Jonas gasping, his face contorted in a mask of defeat. The air held still. Titan stepped forward, his body anchoring himself between child and man, as if to declare, "She will never be alone again." Daniel trembled at the vision. This dog had broken through chains, not for himself, but so a child could breathe, could speak, could live. Jonas rasped, "She's my daughter. You don't understand." But his voice was hollow, drained of weight. The truth was there for all to see. No love locks a child in darkness. Charlie advanced, voice firm. "You lost the right to call yourself a father long ago, Jonas. Ciara's lips moved, her words trembling. But free, I don't want to be silent anymore. Daniel wrapped the girl in his arms, while Titan stepped back half a pace, leaving space for that embrace. Yet the dog's amber eyes never left Jonas, glowing, like a reminder that every falsehood had finally cracked open. The room, once a shrine to silence, now echoed with shouts, the grind of teeth, the splinter of wood, and the pounding of human hearts that had chosen to face the truth. Outside, heavy rain hammered the roof, each drop washing years of dust from the weathered walls, and with that sound came the spark of new hope. A door had been broken, yet many walls still waited to fall. The house sank into thick darkness, lit only by flashes of lightning that carved across the window frame, revealing the raw wood split wide on the door. Rain hammered the tin roof like a drumbeat, pushing them forward. Daniel's shoulders bled from where he had thrown himself against the wood again and again, but he stood firm, beside Titan, no longer uncertain. Memories rose, of the day long ago when he had walked away from a soul in need, a shadow that had weighed on him for years. But now, in front of him, was a trembling child crying out for rescue, and a loyal German shepherd, straining with all his might against the chains. This time there would be no retreat. Together, Titan Daniel whispered, his hand resting on the dog's shoulder, like a vow. Titan lifted his head, amber eyes flashing. He gave a low growl and stepped back for momentum. Daniel braced as well, gathering the last of his strength. In that instant, man and dog became one. Two souls sharing a heartbeat, a single hunger for freedom. Thunder cracked. Titan hurled himself forward, powerful frame slamming into the door, and Daniel pushed with every ounce of his weight. The impact shook the housewood, exploding into shards. With a deafening crash, the door burst open, scattering debris into the air. Lightning spilled through the gap, blinding white against the dust. For a heartbeat, time stood still. Then Daniel and Titan charged into the darkness, where Ciara crouched, her eyes swollen with tears. Titan surged ahead, body a shield between her and Jonas. A growl thundered from his chest, so deep it rattled the walls. Ears, sharp teeth bared in the lightning's glare. He was no longer just a dog. He was the embodiment of protection, of unconditional love. Jonas stumbled back. His polished mask shattered his lips, trembling without words, his eyes wide with fear. Daniel stood behind Titan, chest heaving, but gaze unwavering. He pulled Ciara into his arms, her small frame trembling against him. Slowly, her breathing steadied as she felt both the shelter of his arms and the unshakable stance of Titan before her. Outside the storm raged, but within these walls the true tempest roared. "She's mine," Jonas screamed, voice raw. "You have no right." Titan's growl cut through his words, claws scraping the floorboards, muscles coiled like springs. His blazing amber gaze carried a message Jonas could not mistake. The lie was finished. Daniel pressed Ciara close, whispering, "You're safe now. Titan will never let anyone hurt you again." The girl looked up through tears, her lips trembling, then steadying with sudden courage. For the first time in endless days of silence, her voice broke free, fragile, yet resolute. "I trust Titan." The words rang out like a declaration, scattering the last of the silence. Charlie burst in, soaked with rain, but his eyes widened at the sight. No further proof was needed. This moment spoke louder than any evidence. Jonas staggered backward, stripped of authority, trembling in the glow of the storm. He was no longer the commanding man he pretended to be, just a hollow figure cornered by truth. Titan lowered his frame and growled again, driving Jonas back against the wall. He did not need to strike. His presence alone dissolved all illusions of power. Still holding Ciara, Daniel turned to Charlie, his voice hard with finality. "We won't let anyone chain her again. This ends now." Charlie nodded fiercely, conviction burning in his eyes. Outside, the rain stopped suddenly, leaving a silence that felt like release. One last flash of lightning lit Daniel and Titan side by side, two guardians standing shoulder to shoulder, holding the nightmare at bay. Jonas froze, eyes wild, his false dominion collapsing around him. Ciara clung tighter to Daniel, her tears no longer from terror, but from release. She lifted her face and said, her voice unsteady, but clear, "I don't want to be silent anymore." Her words echoed across the room, carried by Titan's growl like a proclamation breaking invisible chains. Daniel bent his forehead to her damp hair, his heart aching yet full of pride. He whispered, "You did it, Ciara." For the first time, true light seeped through the cracks of that dark room. The silence after the crash was heavy. Splinters lay scattered on the floor, mixed with Daniel's ragged breathing and Titan's steady growl. Outside, the air was thick with the smell of wet earth, the storm's echo clinging to the walls. Daniel held Ciara tighter, feeling every tremor in her body. His heartbeat was fierce, but it was the rhythm of resolve, the pulse of a man who had finally chosen light over shadow. He whispered against her ear, "You're safe now. No one will ever lock you in the dark again." Ciara buried her face against him, her tears soaking his rain-wet shirt, yet for the first time her body softened in trust, as if she finally believed the chains had fallen. Charlie, pale from what he had witnessed, pulled out his phone, voice sharp and urgent. "I need backup immediately. Location Willow Creek, Jonas Hale's house. It's a critical situation." While Charlie made the call, Titan remained planted in front of the room, his solid frame brimming with power. His amber eyes locked on Jonas' ears erect, each heavy breath striking the silence like a hammer. He did not move, as if to ensure that no one, not even Jonas, would ever step closer to Ciara again. Jonas had lost every trace of his composed, polished demeanor. He leaned against the wall, breathing raggedly, his shirt disheveled, his bloodshot eyes burning with desperation. His voice broke into a growl. "You don't understand anything. This is the only way she'll learn obedience." Daniel turned, his voice cold yet resolute. "Obedience through darkness and fear. You stole a child's childhood just to prove your power. That isn't teaching, Jonas. That's imprisonment." Ciara lifted her tear-reddened eyes. Her small hand trembled but held tight to Titan's leash. For the first time sheltered within Daniel and Titan's protection, she stared directly at her father. Her voice was frail, yet piercingly clear. "I don't want to be silent anymore." The words echoed through the room, rattling the very shadows. Jonas faltered, his face twisted, but there was no excuse strong enough to withstand her gaze. From the distance, the sharp wail of sirens drew closer. Charlie lowered his phone, nodding at Daniel. "They're on their way." Jonas lurched forward, but Titan surged ahead, a thunderous snarl ripping through the air claws, raking the floorboards, freezing him in place. Those blazing amber eyes formed a wall, forcing Jonas back into the corner where he belonged. The front door burst open. Two police officers and a social worker swept in, flashlights cutting through the dust-filled air. Charlie quickly approached, relaying the situation. Daniel held Ciara close, his hand gently rubbing her back, each touch steady and reassuring. Titan stepped back half a pace, but his body still shielded them, like a soldier who refused to lower his guard until the danger was truly gone. One officer strode forward, his tone sharp. "Jonas Hale, you are under arrest for abuse and unlawful confinement." Jonas thrashed, hatred flooding his eyes, but the officer's grip was firm. The metallic click of handcuffs snapped shut, sealing away the masquerade of the perfect father. Ciara whimpered softly, pressing her face against Daniel's chest. Titan tilted his head, ears quivering as if to match her breaths. In that instant, the house, once filled with shadows, seemed to exhale into silence and peace. Charlie placed a steady hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You did the right thing. this wasn't just about saving Sierra. It was about finally letting the truth be seen. Daniel nodded faintly, eyes lingering on Sierra and Titan. The burden inside him loosened. This time he hadn't walked away. This time he had chosen to stand. Outside, the rain had ceased. A pale moon broke through the clouds, silver light spilling across the garden. The echo of cuffs and fading footsteps carried Jonas away, while Titan remained still, his amber eyes gleaming beneath the night's glow. Daniel leaned down, whispering to the dog, "Well done, Titan. You've guarded what mattered most." Titan stretched toward Sierra, licking her small hand. The girl looked up, her childlike eyes glistening with fragile light. In that moment, an invisible bond tightened. She had found safety, and Titan had found a soul to protect. As the police car disappeared, silence settled over the house. Charlie spoke quietly. "For now, Sierra will stay with you, Daniel. We'll handle the guardianship, but what matters most is that she has a safe home." Daniel embraced her firmly, determination flickering in his gaze. He knew this was just the beginning, but he was ready. That night, Sierra drifted into sleep on the living room sofa. Titan curled at her feet, his ears pricked as he kept vigil until dawn. Daniel sat close, watching quietly, his chest stirring with a rare peace after the storm. On the porch, the scent of damp earth rode the breeze, whispering of a new day. And for them, it was more than just another morning. It was the morning of rescue, the morning of hope. By sunrise, Willow Creek lay bathed in soft golden light. Rays pierced the maple leaves, scattering patterns across the stone path leading to Daniel's wooden house. The storm had passed, both outside and within, but its weight lingered in every heart that had just stepped out of the dark. Jonas Hale was officially transferred to psychiatric treatment after the preliminary hearing. He sat in the transport van, hands trembling, no longer raging, no longer dignified. Only a father forced to face the shadows in his own mind. The court had ruled before any thought of redemption, Jonas must first relearn what love means, stripped of chains and fear. The news rippled through Willow Creek. People whispered, stunned, many mourning the fall of a man once admired. But truth had surfaced, and this time light had prevailed. Meanwhile, Sierra stayed with Daniel under Charlie's watch and social services care. The quiet cabin brimmed with new warmth. Curtains washed clean windows open to welcome daylight, a wooden table set with warm milk and cookies from the town bakery. It was simple, but it was safety. It was the childhood she deserved. And Titan, as though understanding, never strayed far. When Sierra studied at the small desk, he lay beneath her feet, his breathing a soft lullaby. When she stepped into the garden, the leash gripped in her tiny hand. Titan's amber eyes swept the world, vigilant yet gentle. To Sierra, he was a listener, a wall, a sanctuary. On some nights, Daniel would wake to faint murmurs. He would find Sierra sitting with Titan, stroking his warm coat, whispering secrets, the cold room. The fear of darkness, the dream of hearing birds instead of bolts on doors. Titan answered with silence, but his patient gaze was enough to soothe every wound. Daniel watched from the doorway, his heart aching yet warmed. He knew it was Titan who had given Sierra the courage to speak. And on another level, Titan had saved him too. The man who had once carried unbearable guilt. One afternoon, Charlie visited smiling as he saw Sierra clutching Titan's leash like it was a lifeline. Sometimes he said softly, "What we need most is a friend who says nothing at all. Just stays so we know we're never alone." Daniel gave a gentle nod, his hand resting firmly on Titan's back. He did what I never had the courage to do, stand between evil and silence. Because of him, I have a chance to make things right. His words lingered in the air like a confession, but also like the first step of a healing journey. Time passed, and slowly, a smile began to bloom on Sierra's lips. She was still timid, but she started going to school, joining simple games with other children. Through every moment, Titan stayed close, his quiet presence pushing the nightmares further and further away. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled across the wooden roof, Ciara sat on the porch with Titan's leash loosely wrapped around her small hand. She twisted it absent-mindedly, humming a broken melody. When Daniel stepped outside, he saw her cheeks flushed beneath the golden glow of dusk. And then, to his surprise, he saw a smile. It was her first smile in many months, light as the wind, yet brighter than any ray of sun. Titan lay beside her, his head resting on her legs, amber eyes fixed on the horizon. The fading light washed his entire frame in gold, turning the scene into a living portrait of renewal. Daniel lowered himself onto the step, feeling the breeze brush against him. And in his chest rose a quiet certainty that all the difficult choices, all the unsteady steps had led to this moment. Ciara leaned close to Titan, whispering, "From now on, I'll tell you everything. I don't want to stay silent anymore." Titan blinked and nudged his muzzle against her palm, as if to give his promise. Watching them, Daniel felt a weight lift from his soul. The shadows of his past, the times he had walked away from those in need, finally found their resting place. By saving Ciara, he had given a child the chance for a whole childhood, and in doing so he had saved himself from the chains of regret. The sky above Willow Creek burned with streaks of orange and crimson as the sun dipped lower. On the porch of that modest home, the image of a girl and her German shepherd gazing toward the horizon became a silent promise. A promise of a new childhood unfolding, one filled with freedom, loyal friendship, and the belief that darkness will always fade when there is light to walk beside you. The story seemed to close there, yet their journey carried on. And in Willow Creek, people began to speak of a dog named Titan, with eyes of amber fire, who taught a girl to find her voice again and gave a man the chance to begin anew. In this journey, Titan was more than a German shepherd with striking eyes. He became a symbol of loyalty and unspoken understanding. His story, intertwined with Ciara and Daniel, reminds us that sometimes a gentle nudge of a dog's muzzle or a steady gaze can open the doors of a heart locked for far too long. German shepherds have always been known for their intelligence, courage, and devotion to protect, but behind their strength lies an even greater gift: the ability to love without condition, to listen without words, and to stand quietly beside wounded souls. Titan taught Ciara how to speak again, and he taught Daniel how to let go of the past and keep walking forward. In that, we see that the bond between a person and a dog is more than companionship. It is medicine for the deepest scars. The message is clear: when we love and cherish animals, we are also learning to be kinder to ourselves and to one another. Every dog, especially a German shepherd, can become a friend who listens, a presence that drives away loneliness and restores hope. The story ends beneath the glow of sunset, yet the love and faith Titan left behind continue to ripple outward. It is a quiet reminder for us to live with more compassion, to protect and to listen, and above all, to love, not only each other, but every living soul that shares this world with us.